It's 2025 and we're still waking up in a raggedy old cart, fending off dragons and playing Skyrim on literally every screen known to man. It's been 14 long years and we're still waiting for the next Elder Scrolls, but at least something got a sequel. Why wait when we can dive back in Tamriel right now as we check out The Elder Scrolls Cookbook Volume 2. The Elder Scrolls The Official Cookbook Volume 2 by Victoria Rosenthal and Aaron Kwong takes us back to Tamriel for another culinary look at the world of Elder Scrolls. Thank you to Inside Editions for sending me this review copy. Now, I already did do a video on the first Elder Scrolls cookbook that came out a few years ago. In fact, it was the very first cookbook critique on the channel, and it kind of kick-started my fascination with nerdy cookbooks. If you want to see how much this channel has changed, then you might get a kick out of watching that video. But back to this cookbook. This is told from the perspective of Urzag Gro-Larak, an apprentice of an orcish culinary genius known as the Gourmet. This is Urzag's collection of recipes that he's learned along his travels that show the heart and history of Tamriel. Take a look at how gorgeous this cover is. It has that faded rustic leather look, and the embossed map is a cool little detail. It also originally comes with this jacket cover, but I think it looks way better without. I kind of find jacket covers kind of annoying, but I guess they added this just to show the food for bookshelf appeal and marketability maybe. The rustic design permeates throughout the pages and in the stories that accompany each recipe, even though the description text is small and thin and kind of hard to read. But for the photos, I love how they have those rustic earthy elements, but also every now and then they sprinkle some funkier and more colorful looking recipes to give it a bit more of a fantasy feel. Really loving how thematic the book feels. Food-wise, I think what differentiates this from the first Elder Scrolls cookbook is that this pulls a lot of inspiration from the Elder Scrolls Online MMO, whereas the first one focuses on the main series. Still expect a lot of rustic European-inspired pub fare, but compared to the first one, the recipes here are a bit more experimentative in introducing more modern flair and using more uncommon types of ingredients. To sum it up, the first Elder Scrolls cookbook feels more rustic, grounded, and traditional, and this Volume 2 feels more out of the box, a little bit more colorful, a little bit more whimsical. Up to you if you prefer one over the other, but I think they actually complement each other very well. Now that you had a look in, time for me to get to cooking. Let's put together a meal to see what Volume 2 has to offer. Our first stop is Falinesti, also known as the Walking City because it moves throughout its province depending on the seasons. Sounds like a GPS nightmare, but find it we must if we want to get a taste of that Falinesti forbidden fruit. This recipe is super simple. In a medium bowl, combine 2 ounces of sliced radish, 2 ounces of halved Kalamata olives, 2 ounces of thinly sliced red onions, 3 ounces of crumbled feta cheese, and 10 thinly sliced mint leaves. Once all of that is well combined, toss in 14 ounces of watermelon that's been cut up to bite-sized pieces, then add in 1.5 tablespoons of olive oil, 2 teaspoons of balsamic vinegar, a teaspoon of lemon zest, and a pinch of kosher salt, and again, toss everything until everything is well coated. And just like that, we're ready to serve. Place in a spinach and arugula mixture inside a bowl. Interesting tidbit from the description states that in Falinesti, where this recipe comes from, there is a green pact, which is a social code that forbids the harming and eating of plant life, but many of its inhabitants break the pact to supplement their meat diets with veggies, so that's why you're seeing the greens here. Maybe that's the forbidden part of the recipe? Top that with a watermelon mixture and dive into the Falinesti forbidden fruit. Before we move on to the next recipe, I just want to bring up that this cookbook just narrowly beat out the Powerpuff Girls cookbook in my previous Patreon poll. Thanks again to my patrons, and if you would like to support the channel and have access to updates, sneak peeks, and be able to vote on cookbook and recipe polls like this, I invite you to check out the Patreon. Thanks! Now that we got the veggies, it's time for some meat. Hope you're game for some game, because we're going to be having a meaty serving of garlic and pepper venison steak. We're going to start off by putting together the marinade. In a small bowl, mix together a 1/4 cup of soy sauce, a teaspoon of Worcestershire sauce, 2 tablespoons of rice wine, 1 tablespoon of honey, and a teaspoon of black pepper. Pour this mixture over 2 pounds of sliced venison steak. Venison might be common or uncommon depending on where you live. Where I am, it's kind of uncommon, but Fortunately, I had some leftover venison meat in the freezer from my Walking Dead cookbook critique. If you want to see some Daryl Dixon inspired deer stew, go ahead and check that out. Take this marinated venison and place it in the fridge in an airtight container overnight. When you're ready to cook, remove from the fridge and let it rest at room temp for an hour. Now to make the sauce, combine together a 1/4 cup of soy sauce, a 1/4 cup of mirin, a 1/4 teaspoon of red pepper flakes, and 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. Mix it all together and set aside. The cookbook calls for a wok, but I don't have one, so I'll be using a large pan instead. Heat up some peanut oil, then fry up half of the venison to brown up all of the sides. Once done, remove the venison, then work on the other half. Remove all the steak and wipe down the wok, then add in 10 minced garlic cloves, 2 tablespoons of minced ginger, and 4 minced scallions using the white and light green parts only. Cook this for about 30 seconds to soften, then add in half a yellow bell pepper, half of an orange bell pepper, and 1 onion, all sliced. Cook for about 8 to 10 minutes until soft, then remove from the heat. Then do the same thing with the other halves of the yellow and orange peppers and another onion. Once that batch is soft, add back in the cooked steak and the first batch of the peppers and onions. Once everything is together, add in the sauce and cook everything for a bit until the sauce has thickened a bit. Now set a bit of rice on a plate and spoon over the meat mixture for a nice hearty serving of garlic and pepper venison steak. And for something sweet, we have to look elsewhere. The home of the feline race of the Khajiit, where they make a mighty tasty breakfast pastry inspired by the thief god Rahjin. These are Rahjin's sugar claws. First, we make the filling by combining together 3 tablespoons of black sesame powder, a tablespoon of ground cinnamon, 2 teaspoons of ground cardamom, 2 tablespoons of light brown sugar, and a pinch of kosher salt. Once well mixed, set aside and save for later. Now to make the sugar claws, we're going to need 2 puff pastry sheets that have already been thawed and cut each of them into 3 equally long strips. Then brush the sheets with some melted and cooled unsalted butter, leaving a 1/2 inch border around the edge. Then top each with a filling, gently pressing it in. Now fold the bottom of each pastry strip and roll it up tight and pinch the edges shut. Then cut each roll in half to make 2 portions. With each portion, we're going to make 5 slits around 1/3 of the way in. Once that's done, transfer over all of the pastry to a large parchment paper-lined baking sheet while making sure to curve it a little bit to open up the cuts slightly. Make sure to leave about 1 inch of space around each claw. All in all, you should have a dozen sugar claws ready to bake, but before the oven, they got to go in the freezer to rest for 30 minutes. While we wait on that, we're going to make a mixture in a small bowl by whisking together an egg yolk and a tablespoon of amaretto. Then in another bowl, we're going to combine 2 teaspoons of sugar, 2 teaspoons of black sesame, and a 1/2 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. After taking the claws out of the freezer, brush each pastry with amaretto egg wash, then sprinkle over some of the cinnamon mixture. Finally, pop these in the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 12 to 15 minutes until golden brown. The last thing we gotta do now is the glaze, so while the pastry is in the oven, whisk together a tablespoon of melted unsalted butter with a 1/2 cup of powdered sugar, teaspoon of vanilla paste, and a pinch of kosher salt, and 2 tablespoons of milk, and mix until you get a nice smooth glaze going. When the pastries are done baking, let them cool for about 5 minutes before drizzling over the glaze for your sweet batch of Rahjin's sugar claws. Time to taste the flavors of Tamriel again. Starting off with the Falinesti forbidden fruit, this is pretty tasty. Savory yet refreshing. Love the sweet, juicy, crispy bite of each watermelon piece, and the radish and the red onions give it additional layers of crunch. The crumbled feta provides the perfect contrast, pairing the salty with the sweet and the creamy with the crispy. You'd think that with the unique and strong flavors of the olive, mint, and balsamic that there would be too much going on, but I think these go together really well, super lovely. I don't even think it really needs the spinach and arugula, but their leafy textures aren't bad also. All in all, a very tasty, unique, and refreshing salad. Moving on to our garlic and pepper venison steak. Yeah, this is pretty yummy also. Now the venison is super lean. Compared to beef, it has a lot less fat content, so it's a little bit tougher, but not a deal breaker. Just a bit more of a jaw workout, but I kind of like this subtle, gamey, earthy taste of it. Still prefer beef though. I like fat. What can I say? But the star of the show here is that sauce. perfect balance of sweet and salty. You can probably put this on whatever protein you want and it would taste good. Next time I'd like to try it with some chicken, beef, or pork, and it'll probably be equally great, if not better. Awesome to eat with rice, but I also ate some of the leftovers during the week with some mashed potatoes, which is a great pairing as well. Highly, highly recommend this one. Now for something sweet, let's take a bite out of these sugar claws, and this is the icing on the cake, the best one so far. Man, I love black sesame with pastries and desserts, the nuttiness with the sweetness, unbeatable pairing. I love the shape of these, and I kind of like how it's already kind of divided into 5 bite-sized pieces, but the cinnamon and cardamom seasoning with the amaretto egg yolk wash takes this to a whole nother level and really gives it a unique taste. It's not just one-dimensionally sweet, but it also tastes warm and fills you with those cozy vibes. Today, I learned that the Khajiit make bomb desserts. So is the Elder Scrolls Cookbook Volume 2 any good? Big fan of this one. Super thematic with the lore permeating the text, visuals, and food. The recipes are rustic with a sprinkle of whimsy. This is a worthy new entry into what is hopefully a series of cookbooks on the world of Elder Scrolls. Hope there's many more to come.